Hello y'all, I hope you're doing really good. After the success of Tropical Freeze with Retro Studios as an established, strong Donkey Kong Country developer, and King K. Rool's return to prominence through Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, it is almost inevitable that we will get a new Donkey Kong game sometime in the future. It could be announced 2 years from now at some E3, or it could be announced 2 days from now at the Game Awards. My hunch for the Game Awards is actually why I'm making this video right now and not in the future, just in case it does get announced sooner than we think it does. It's most likely that we'll get Metroid Prime 4 on the spotlight of the VGAs this year, but at some point, Donkey Kong Country will be made as it's one of Nintendo's best franchises. So as a lifelong fan of the series, I'm going to offer up 10 points for my hopes for this theoretical game. So let's do this. So first and foremost, I want Retro Studios to make this next theoretical game. I've really grown on them as a developer over the past few years. I know some people don't like them because they haven't used King K. Rool in their past games, but I think that's an ignorant reason to dislike the entire development team and all of the work they've done. You've got to judge the gameplay, the graphics, and the villains and the locations that they themselves have created. I'm not a 100% fan of the work, because everything does have their flaws. Nothing in this world is perfect, and I will admit that the Tikis are not phenomenal villains. But DKC Returns is still an excellent game. The introduction of silhouette levels were great. The rocket barrel levels are epic. They revived the franchise that was thought to be dead, and they've been growing. Their sequel, Tropical Freeze, is one of the best, if not the best, entry in the series. I frankly think all of the DK games are great in their own way. DKC for the classic jungle feel and playable DK, DKC 2 for the pirate motif and Diddy and Dixie's playful outing. It was my first game as a kid, and I view it as the best. But Tropical Freeze does really stand up to it, and I say that out of respect to Rareware and Retro alike. DKC 3 is pretty unique with the Northern Hemisphere feel, which is almost dystopian with the normal Kremlings out of sight, and it makes you question what's going on with the evil Baron K. Rulenstein at the end of the game. Tropical Freeze may not have the Kremlings, but it has an incredible art direction and just overall direction, and it has phenomenal gameplay. The backgrounds are super beautiful, they're really good. The gameplay is solid, and once you start going fast, you'll never stop as the levels are designed to be played with speed in mind. And they give you quality of life with the time trial mode, so you can practice going fast as well. If you love a challenge, they give you hard mode, where it lets you play as a single Kong with one heart. Retro Studios is really bringing the franchise in a good direction, and I think if they make a third game, making their thing a trilogy, the third one will be the best DK game of all time, because they've had the practice, they've been going in a better direction, and now it'll just be it will be, if there's anything that's going to be perfect, this will be perfect. The other 9 points, plus Retro's direction, is what I think would make this a perfect game. This next point is definitely the return of King K. Rool. Lord Frederick and the Snowmads, in my opinion, were pretty good villains. The Snowmads were goofy and militaristic, and had quite a variety of abilities and appearances. The frozen environments of Tropical Freeze are really unique, and I cannot complain whatsoever. I love K. Rool, and he is basically Donkey Kong's Bowser, but you don't need the same villain 100% of the time. I think the Snowmads were an excellent departure from the main villain theme, and I honestly think the Snowmads could return later down the line, but this is assuming we have tons and tons of games, so they can make various appearances. That's probably not going to happen. But basically, like I said, I'm not a big fan of the Tikis. However, I do like their design and music, but they're the main reason I don't like the Tikis as much as the Snowmads is they aren't goofy and militaristic in the same way that the Snowmads are, and the Snowmads' goofiness and militarism basically is paralleled with the Kremlings. The Kremlings have that kind of thing. DKC 2 is my first game, and it has long-lasting impressions because the Kremlings in the game have that pirate motif, and it really works for them. Their black jackets and Donkey Kong 64 also apply to this. They're kind of stupid and goofy, but they're also kind of intimidating at the same time, and I think that makes them really strong villain and characters. So basically with King K. Rool and Smash now, I think Retro can't make their own villains anymore. I think Nintendo will pressure them into using King K. Rool, but I think this theoretical pressure won't even have to happen because I feel Retro might want to use King K now that they have the DK formula down. Before they were just working out their own stuff, and I think they do definitely have it down now. And if they do use him, I think it'll be perfect. I think it'll actually be better than Rareware. I think they're gonna do King K justice if they do him. I was going to mention this next point, it's point number 2, but I just had to slip King K. Rool in there first. So now that the Kremlings are positioned into this ideal theoretical title, I can't help but mention David Wise. David Wise is a legendary composer. He's the composer of my childhood music, pretty much. He's the main composer for the original DK games. It's outside of kind of 3 a little bit, and he came back for Tropical Freeze, and it's epic. DKC returns to some original music like the Rocket Barrel theme and the Tiki theme, which is music that I do like a lot, but it mainly reused the original soundtrack, and therefore Returns fails to have a sound of its own, in my opinion. And I think that's a major flaw of the game. And it was Miyamoto's ideas. So yeah, you can blame Miyamoto for that. Anyway, Tropical Freeze has a unique sound and tons of great tracks because David Wise was brought back and he composed a familiar DK sound, but a new DK sound. And as he composed the soundtrack for the original game, he can often call back to them without totally reusing their songs. For example, in Irate 8, the Octopus level, there's a motif from Lockjaw's Locker, which is like the water level thing from DKC 2. And I love that theme in that game, so when I first played Tropical Freeze and I heard that music, it really brought me back to that. So if David Wise is in, the game is going to be great. Next, I'd like to see more animal buddies. The original games made by Rareware are kind of defined by the lot of variety that they have when it comes to animal buddies. Like in the original you have Winky the Frog, and Espresso the Ostrich, and in 2 you have Rattly the Snake and Squitters the Spider. They all drastically changed the gameplay of like their levels that they're in, and they had unique challenges made around them, and they were just overall really fun to use. And they were good because they were functional. Retro has only made 1 animal buddy for Returns and Freeze, and that is Rambi, who's kind of like the staple animal buddy, I think, outside of Squawks, who in those games will like find puzzle pieces for you. I can't really complain about this because it's stated that Retro has planned to use other animal buddies in Tropical Freeze, but that weren't able to implement them, basically. There's concept art that they were going to make a bird that you would hold on to, similar to Squawks in the original games, and float down. It just never happened. So I think if anything is going to happen, I think more animal buddies are definitely going to happen. And the one that I want to see the most is Ungard the Swordfish. Rambi is kind of like the staple, like I said, but in my opinion, I think Ungard is more iconic because he was in DKC 1, 2, and 3. And as Retro made phenomenal water levels in Tropical Freeze, I think Ungard would be stellar to bring back, because most water levels and platformers are a pain in the ass, really. But Retro made really well designed and comfortable to swim through water levels. And while Rambi in Tropical Freeze and Returns, his gameplay is often intense and solely based around charging forward, I wonder if they could take that style and bring it underwater for Ungard. But I can really kind of almost imagine Ungard in HD, like imagine him with precise, really comfortable controls for like this beautiful underwater environments that they make. Of course, Retro could make their own animal buddy, and I think that'd be super interesting, and I want to see what they come up with. But if they bring back anything, I think Ungard is essential. So my 5th and 6th points kind of blend together because they kind of relate together. So basically in Tropical Freeze, you have your playable Kongs as DK, Diddy, Dixie, and Cranky. And I think that they should keep this formula as well as keep Funky Kong from New Funky Mode, basically. So it's basically inevitable that if there is a new DK game, that DK and Diddy are going to be playable as like, they're like, I think the most recognizable, like they're in Smash, they're like in other games like Mario Kart and stuff like that. They're going to be around. Dixie is my personal, like, I like her. I think she's the most iconic team member that shouldn't be retired. Like I said, like I really like DKC 2 and 3 and Freeze. She's a good character and a friend of the casual player, basically, with her hair recovery. So like, there's no reason to remove her. Having her in the game, I think, makes it better. And then Cranky is a surprisingly fun character to use with his pogo cane. Like when he was first announced, like I was like kind of like, what the hell? But when you play with him, it's addicting. Like you can go for hours just bouncing around, going faster and getting better. And Cranky was technically a Rareware character, but his gameplay is entirely made by Retro Studios. And if they want to continue to like develop their own identity, I think keeping Cranky would really help do that, because he represents the old, but his gameplay style is new, and I think that's cool. And the same thing can be said for Funky Kong. So basically, I think these Kongs should be in the game, and if they want to add more, like Lanky or Chunky, or even make their own new Kong, that'd be super interesting. But the point that this ties into, which is either 5 or 6 depending on how you're counting, would be an overhaul of the buddy system. Because in returns and freeze, basically, you are forced to play exclusively as DK, and then Diddy, Dixie, or Cranky is basically a power up. They give you more health and like basically like an extra jump or the Poco. But in the original game, the Kongs were characters and not really power ups. Like you could play individually as either one and switch between them. And I think like they need to bring this back, and it would be kind of hard to do with the current system that they have, because it would basically require an overhaul. But I think it might be possible to be explored or even basically pulled off. So like how I'm thinking about this is that you would be able to play as whatever Kong you want. Like say if you're gonna you could play as DK and you could have Diddy, but he would not always be on your back. You could have him on your back if you want to. But you could also switch around and then play as Diddy in the front, basically, kind of like the old games. And then, also, I think you should be able to combine Kong. So, like, you could play as Dixie and Diddy, or you could play as Cranky and DK. So, basically, any combination you can think of, I think it should be possible. And this ties into multiplayer, because DKC is a game that you can play multiplayer now. And I play it with my brother a lot. And one person always has to be DK, and I find when you do multiplayer that is very limiting, because one person has to be DK and the other person is like the side Kong. But no, you can't really do like Diddy and Dixie or like Cranky and DK. I mean, you can do that one, but you can't do like Cranky and Dixie, basically. So those last 6 points were pretty generalized, and these next few are going to be very specific and kind of my own personal ideas. And while like the past were my also own personal ideas, I think that they're concepts that the general community would either like to see or can kind of somewhat agree upon. Like people want Rool, people want to do Diddy and Dixie. Those are kind of like generalized things. But these things are kind of specific. So these might not match up with yours, but if you have certain bosses or ideas or like level themes that you've thought up, definitely let me know because I'd like to hear it. But with that said, I like to see the octopus again. I don't know if he's got a name or not, but you know what I'm talking about. The octopus is one of Retro Studios' trademarks. Basically, a level in Returns was surrounded around him, and a level was also built around him in Tropical Freeze. And in the level in Tropical Freeze, the level's basically set up so he's pressuring you, and it's almost like a mini boss fight throughout the entire level. It's like a cinematic boss fight. Like, you're avoiding him and you're not really fighting him, but you finally topple him and beat him by the end of the level. And that's pretty cool. It's a great level. And I don't know if like you actually kill him at the end or not with the bombs, but I want to see him again because he was in Returns and because he was in Freeze. I feel like he's really part of like Retro's identity. And if they do make a third game, this is like assuming that they do make the third one. I would actually like to see the octopus as a boss. And it might sound crazy, but if he's weakened from the bombs at the end of Irate 8, he might be more manageable for like the DK crew to fight physically, whether it's underwater like Fugu, or you're just on the seashore like throwing bombs at him, basically. Personally, I would really be hyped to see the octopus again. Like, he's just a fun kind of... He's basically like a character now of the new games. And I think a lot of fans would like to see him return, whether through another level or a boss. And maybe the same thing for the Bat, because the Bat was in Returns and he was also frozen in Freeze. And if he's a boss, we would like to teach him a lesson for that one Rocket Barrel level. Simply put it, this one's really simple. I think they need to buff Diddy Kong. Dixie is basically a better Diddy. It sounds kind of blunt, but it's basically true. In Tropical Freeze, Diddy is almost obsolete. He's only really viable in underwater levels, where his jetpack gets you super good acceleration underwater. But like basically above ground, when Dixie jumps, her hairspin gives you vertical recovery, and Diddy's only gives you a slight horizontal boost to your jump. And it's basically not as good. And Cranky is sometimes better, Dixie's sometimes better, and Diddy's only really slightly better than Solo DK. I think the perfect solution would just be to give Diddy an infinite cartwheel. In Funky mode, Funky Kong can roll infinitely, and then in normal mode, you can only really roll infinitely if you're DK and then you have Diddy, Dixie, or Cranky on your back. So if they give Solo Diddy the ability to infinitely roll, I think that's like the only patch that's needed. Finally, I'd like to see more callbacks to past games, and Retro is really good at this. Like I said, the the bat and the octopus from Returns are also in Tropical Freeze, and Retro, who made the Metroid Prime games, also have various Metroid Easter eggs in the game as well. And most notably, the final world of Tropical Freeze, DK Isle, basically each level within that world represents an entire world from Returns. So it's super cool, and like in some instances, the level backgrounds match up flawlessly from game to game, and it shows a genuine attention to detail, and really it like reveals like the effort and care put into these games. And I really appreciate that, and it frankly makes the new Super Mario Bros. Series and their recycled level themes, not just in one game but across 4 games, like almost disgusting. Basically, like there needs to be more care and like this attention to detail on these callbacks. Basically, I think that's part of what makes DK so good. So as a fan, my ideal hope is that there's some Donkey Kong Country 2 callbacks if King K. Rool returns. And basically what I mean by that is I want the final world of the game to be Crocodile Isle. And like I said in Tropical Freeze, the final world, each level represents a whole world from the game before it. So if Crocodile Isle was the final world in like this new theoretical game, each level in it could be a callback to a world from DKC 2. So like one level would be a pirate ship level, one level would be Gloomy Gulch, like one level would be Crazy Kremlin, and I'm gonna get into that in a second. But basically, I think that would be super cool, and that would be an awesome callback. And the game could basically have you travel across the islands to get to Crocodile Isle, and Crocodile Isle would be the final world. That's how I would do it as a fan, but I'm super interested to see what exactly they do. And I just mentioned Crazy Kremland, this is like a super hard idea to express because it's more like a visual thing than an explanation. But if they do make any Crocodile Isle levels, I really want to see Crazy Kremland in HD, and my personal idea for it is a silhouette level. Because in DKC2 it was like this nighttime level, it was kind of dark, and you had all these bright lights in the background with like the Ferris wheels and the carnival tents and the fireworks. So I think Retro Studios could do something really awesome, because you know how they have their own silhouette levels, and so the silhouette levels are some of the most beautiful and like epic levels in the games. It could be a Crazy Kremland silhouette level, and I wish I was an artist so I could design this myself. But just like imagine like DK and Diddy in Crazy Kremland, and then like they're like you can only really see their tie and their hat, and then all you see is just like the fireworks and the roller coasters in the background, and that's like the only source of light in the level, and everything else is dark. I think that'd be super awesome. It's like really hard to explain, but I can just really kind of almost visualize like the Ferris wheels being platforms, kind of like the windmills from Autumn Heights. Maybe even a little minecart section on a roller coaster to finish off the level. They could do like a House of Mirrors or whatever it's called as part of the level 2 maybe. I don't know. I feel like they could do so much. I'm just really excited to see what they see. And like I said, this theoretical game could be like 2 to 5 years from now. It could be 2 days from now that it gets announced. We just gotta wait and see. So I really want to hear your ideas for like levels, if it's just like a specific level you would like to see, or a very general concept like playable Kongs. So thank you for watching.
Okay, that's all the time I've got. I gotta get back to playing Animal Crossing New Leaf on my Nintendo 3DS.